Well, speaking of evil conglomerates...
Boy, that was an easy segue.
That was the best one we've ever done. Have you been following everything that broke last week after we were done with the experience with Vince McMahon and WWE sending out a letter to talent notifying them that they are no longer allowed to have any third-party deals? They have to end these deals, whatever they have, within 30 days?
Well, yes, I was keeping up with this, and I think everybody was dumbfounded at what a third-party deal was. Because I know they quit doing third-party promoter deals. I was the last one in the office to do them, where you would book the contracted talent to third-party promoters on their days off to make them some extra money. But they quit doing that because the rings were iffy and they didn't know whether a guy was going to get hurt or not or whatever. And then they started booking everybody and making them more money, and they eliminated that feature. What these third parties are now is the Twitches and Twitters and Cameos and all that stuff of the world, right? That's what they call third parties now.
I would think so. YouTube also, I would include in that.
Well, see, that's the thing. Their statement, they didn't actually come out and say what these third parties were, right? And that's why all the guys were up in arms like, well, what does this mean? Is this mean I've got to give up YouTube, or I've got to give up this, or I've got to give up that? And they're supposed to be clarifying this. But here's the thing. I've said this before. The guys are horribly underpaid. The guy in relation to what any other sports franchise pays its talent. The guys are also not treated as employees, even though they have to, whenever the office says jump, they got to say how high and do everything, blah, 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 be there, dress a certain way, call themselves a certain thing. They fit every requirement of an employee, but they are treated as independent contractors, so they don't get benefits, blah, 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 health insurance, all that good stuff. So they have now, and in a pandemic, they're not running shows. So they've now found a way to make extra money. You know which side of that I fall down on after that preamble, Brian?
Which side is that?
The office is right and the boys are wrong. And I'm surprised it's got this far, and I'm surprised nobody's brought it up. In the 80s and 90s, this is before social media, Twitter and YouTube and Twitch and Cameo and etc., when everybody didn't have a broadcasting fucking facility in their pocket. If you were under contract to the WWF, you couldn't do an interview with the Poughkeepsie Bugle newspaper unless it was cleared by the office. You couldn't be on AM radio in fucking Gulfport at 5 a.m. unless it was cleared by the office. These guys are doing their own thing under their own names while being advertised as and publicly seen on national TV as different people on the fucking WWE television program. I would have nipped that in the bud long ago. You've got a guy that's a Russian on TV, but on fucking Twitch or on Twitter, he's using his real name and he's from fucking Cleveland. Or you've got people that are supposed to be in this torrid affair, but on Cameo or on fucking whatever, the Facebook, they're married to other people. Or they actually have their real names or their gimmick name, so-and-so, as played by so-and-so. How long would it have taken Vince McMahon in the 80s or early 90s, when he had control of his fucking company and his faculties, if a guy that was presented as someone on his television program had come out in the newspapers or on national television, because that's the equivalent now of the internet and you disseminate knowledge publicly. That's the way you would do it back then. Newspaper, magazine, television, and say, well, I'm really not this guy. My real name's so-and-so, and I really don't have anything to do with this at all. He would have fired him. I would have fired him. Every booker, every promoter would have fired him. The only way your guys' real names got out in the fucking public perception is when they were arrested or sued and it made the newspaper. And then you tried to cover it up. One part of a successful part of booking a wrestling roster in a wrestling company is having complete, when you know what you're doing, when you're a good booker, complete and total control over your talent and the way that they are advertised, publicized, and perceived in public. So all these guys going out there doing their own thing, this evil heel really fucking plays video games and contributes to charity. It's all bullshit. Be who you're supposed to be every time that you are mentioned, talked about, appear, or speak in public. Be who you're supposed to be. So all this...
Hold on.
Wait a minute. I'm about to get to a point. So all this fucking bullshit, business exposing, gimmick exposing, third-party shit that they all do as private citizens, they can do after they're off WWE television when they're not wrestling stars anymore. And in the meantime, there's a simple way to cut this shit out and concentrate on fucking getting talent over and not having these outside fucking influences and these third parties. Make the guys employees, give them insurance, and pay them right. They won't have to fucking get on Cameo.
Well, boom.
I think the talent is wrong for doing all this. It's not something you should do in a wrestling company. And now that it's possible to do this with social media, since the WWE is currently the most well-financed wrestling company in history, they ought to say, no, you're not doing this. We're going to pay you. We're going to pay you however much money that you've agreed to or that you want to agree to without you doing this. Either agree to it, sign, we'll pay you, don't do this outside shit, or don't agree to it, we won't sign you, go do your outside shit. You can't double dip. If you're not, hey, if there was guys smart enough out there to fucking be all over social media and get themselves over as who they're supposed to be, like MJF, that'd be one thing. That's fine. But your real names, violating your fucking gimmick, doing things out of character for of who you're supposed to be, no. But at the same time, especially for these underneath guys, they've got to make it worth their while to fucking not be working shows and et cetera, et cetera. And maybe they could finally figure out after what's it been, 10 years, how to pay royalties off that fucking network. Because everybody's royalty checks went to shit once that thing came up. So yeah, and it's always, the contracts have always been that way. We own your intellectual property, your likeness, your blah, 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 even your real name for the term of the contract. Some people had that fucking sideways. How can they own their real name? They can't own their real name forever, but while they're under contract to the WWE, they own everything about them, which is another reason why I'm not going to sign any more contracts ever again. But I don't need to. So both sides are correct in the way they're looking at it.
I think if they were employees, you'd be correct. But the reason those contracts wouldn't hold up if anyone really wanted to fight it in court is because they're independent contractors. And WWE does not have the right to tell these people that they can't go out there and do things on the side. In terms of people using their real name, they're doing that because that they've been able to get away with. If it was, Hulk Hogan, well, I shouldn't say that because he owns his own name. But if it was a guy using a name that WWE owns, even if it's a name the guy picked for himself while under their employ, then, WWE would go out and stop them. People are using their own names to get around that. People are using their own names to play video games.
I know.
Twitch and stuff.
It's fucking ridiculous.
And your argument about them exposing the business, that's not the WWE's argument. So I'm not even going to throw anything towards that.
They're making themselves look goofy. Ronda Rousey had some kind of aura about her as this badass judo champion, Olympic champion, chick that would kick your ass. And now she's on the internet playing a saxophone and video games and feeding chickens. They don't know how to keep themselves over.
This is WWE wanting to take the money that people are making on side deals. And this is also WWE getting upset by things like, AJ Styles destroyed Paul Heyman on Twitch and it got out there. It's not about AJ Styles using his real name. It's about him exposing behind the scenes stuff in the company.
Well, and that's true also. Once again, you always had to have clearance to do an interview because they wanted to make sure you weren't going to say something they didn't want you to say. This is not new. Anybody that's gone into that company and think that you have any freedom to do anything, you're crazy. But I'm just saying, when so many guys are doing so much goofy shit that's detrimental to the way they're being presented and or perceived by the public. Of course, the office doesn't want them to do all this stupid shit on fucking other platforms, but they need to pay them.
But they need to be employees
to make up for that.
Yeah.
Well, they need to be employees, and they need to pay them enough to where they don't fucking feel like they need to do that, because it's mutually exclusive. You can't do both.
And let's talk a little bit about the history with this. Sergeant Slaughter was one of the top baby faces in the World Wrestling Federation in 1984. He ended up leaving because he signed his own deal with G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
Vince McMahon said, all my talent is with me and my deal with LJN. No one's going to have their individual deal. And Sergeant Slaughter was gone. He was one of the top guys. Jesse Ventura left in 1990 because he signed his own video game deal with Sega, and Vince McMahon didn't want anyone to have their own individual deals. Jesse Ventura was gone from the WWF. Now, Jesse Ventura has been one of the people very vocal about the independent contractor clause, how bullshit it is with wrestling. Did you see the Andrew Yang tweets?
Yes. Good old Andrew. He's a fan. Hey, Vince, get your independent contractor shit straightened out.
Well, no, even beyond that. I mean, I have it in front of me. If I'm not the Secretary of Labor, I'm pretty confident I'll have his or her number to talk about the ridiculous classification of WWE wrestlers as independent contractors while controlling their name and likeness for years, even for something as benign as Cameo. That's what it is. What your argument is earlier, I think is valid only if they're employees. But if you're going to say that someone's an independent contractor, you have to treat them like an independent contractor. And that means you can't prevent them from doing anything else. You can't say, you only work for me, you can't work for anyone else, you're an independent contractor.
But you can if you... Here's the thing. If you tell me, Jim, I'm going to sign you to this contract for $1 million instead of $400,000, and you're going to be an independent contractor, but you can't do anything else. I wasn't making an extra $600 on the side anyway, Vince, so fine. You can still do it. You can write it. That's what I've said about the deals. They can make any deal that Vince wants to make. He can put any clause in, take any clause out, make any deal. He's done it 1,000,000 times. There's been all kinds of customizations go on.
Brock Lesnar had sponsors on his gear for a while.
He got to Jimmy John, the fucking fat fuck that likes to go over and slaughter all the animals in Africa because he's a gutless, dickless wonder. And fuck Jimmy John and his fucking sandwiches, a piece of shit.
I wasn't familiar with Jimmy John. I didn't know about that. Okay.
You didn't know that? No, there's an actual Jimmy John. He's a fat, disgusting looking fuck that has pictures of himself smiling from ear to ear, sitting on top of giraffes and elephants and rhinoceroses that he uses his sandwich money to fly over to fucking Africa and murder, because they take all these rich white fucks like Douchebag Von Fuckface and Thurston Shitbag III, the two Trump twins. They go over there and they make up for their small dicks with their big guns, and they murder these beautiful animals. And Jimmy John, same way. That's why I wouldn't eat a goddamn Jimmy John sandwich if I was dying of starvation. That was the last food on the earth. He can go fuck himself. But that's why that fucking, because Vince said, okay, if Brock wants to have Jimmy John on his fucking ass, he can have Jimmy John on his ass because it's Brock. So Vince can make any specific deal he wants to make. The underlings just tell guys that he can't, because that way they don't all ask for special deals.
Did you see CM Punk's tweet?
I did not.
All right, guys, girls, are they going to fire everyone? Just keep doing you. Don't worry.
Well,
I like him more and more. I got to say something.
Yeah.
Since he left wrestling, and I liked him as a wrestler, he was really good. I like him more and more the more I read his tweets and his attitude towards that company. I like him more and more.
And just the curmudgeonly stance. But and that's the thing.
I don't even think that's curmudgeonly. I think
it's not it's a gentle curmudgeon. But what are they can't fire y'all. What if everybody just said, well, you know what? Fuck it. There's a pandemic, all this other shit going on. We're just not going to show up. The same thing would have happened in the previous or in 40 years. He would have had to done something, but because the boys can't get together and can't stay together, it doesn't happen. And now that's another reason why this publicly traded mainstream company, big business bullshit, talking about him on Wall Street, that's horribly detrimental to the wrestling business, because now he's got legitimate people with their eyes on him, Andrew Yang, and I know the Secretary of Labor. Sooner or later, somebody's going to pay attention to this shit and take it seriously, even though it's wrestling.
They'll try to sell the company before they lose that independent contract.
But anyway, the whole thing is I agree with both sides, and I explained why.
Did you see any of the other tweets from talent about this?
I have, but I'd love to hear you read me some.
The former Renee Paquette, the wife of Jon Moxley.
I believe I've heard they're married.
So, guess now would be a good time to launch my Twitch and Cameo. And by the way, there's a good example. Her name's Renee Paquette. She was Renee Young in WWE. I believe she chose that name, I read somewhere, because she was a fan of Neil Young. She doesn't own that name. She picked the name. They trademarked it. They own it. If she's the one who came up with the name, tell me how that's fair.
She should have gone to an independent show and used it first once there.
And then they would have said, you have to come up with something else because we're not going to use that.
Well, exactly. And see, I've said that's garbage too, because I always wanted, if I started guys, I wanted them to go away and become stars elsewhere and then have the same name so that when they come back to me, they can draw me some money because now they're big stars. That's the way wrestling worked. All this, nobody else could ever have this name. I understand why they do it, but it's just led to more of the fact that wrestling is turned into garbage. Guys can't travel. Guys can't be stars all around the world anymore.
We have a simple tweet from Paige. She just wrote, nope. Mick Foley says banning wrestlers from making extra money on third-party deals, Twitch, YouTube, Cameo, strikes me as a crummy thing to do. Just my opinion. And then Kevin Nash replied to that, especially as 1099 independent contractors. You're an employee if you have to show up at a specific time and are restricted monetary gains in your personal time. Ask for your health insurance coverage and profit sharing. And then the Andrew Yang tweet was retweeted by Dave Bautista, who wrote, hashtag no comment, but I'm retweeting. Hashtag real talk. I mean, those are some pretty significant names. Kevin Nash, Mick Foley, and Dave Bautista, who are tweeting out their issues with this.
Well, because they know. And I don't know how they've gotten away with it for this long when they've been calling such attention to themselves. That's another reason why wrestling promoters like to always operate under the radar, except for with their audience, because too much scrutiny from people outside who don't understand how the business works invariably leads to something that's bad for the boys, the promoters, or both.
After the outcry because of this, WWE released a statement. I'll read you this. Much like Disney and Warner Brothers, WWE creates, promotes, and invests in its intellectual property, i.e. the stage names of performers like The Fiend, Bray Wyatt, Roman Reigns, Big E, and Braun Strowman. It is the control and exploitation of these characters that allows WWE to drive revenue, which in turn enables the company to compensate performers at the highest levels in the sports entertainment industry. Notwithstanding the...
Just not the highest levels in sports.
Is it the highest levels? I mean...
No, it's just not the highest levels in sports. But it's even the highest level in sports entertainment.
But compared to AEW, one night a week on AEW, you're allowed to have third-party deals. I mean, it'd be interesting to evaluate one deal versus the other.
Well, there are no third parties right now, so basically those guys are working one day a week, maybe. And they still can't get them on the show, but they...
But Kip Sabian, for instance, he plugged his Twitch on the pay-per-view. He's allowed to do that. WWE's telling wrestlers you can't do that.
Well, and that was a response to WWE telling them they can do it. Well, see, we're baby faces over here, but back to reality. The real name business and trademarking of the real name is gaga, as we said. But in that quote, in that statement, they're not Disney because they're not protecting Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse is a fictional person, a fictional character. These are real people. So then it becomes, are we trademarking Luke Skywalker or are we trademarking Mark Hamill? Right?
Well, it's even beyond that. Are we trademarking Luke Skywalker and telling Mark Hamill he's not allowed to do anything on the side?
That's what they keep trying to make wrestling like acting, and these are performers playing a part, and that's why it's another of the many reasons why that's not the case and it doesn't work. It's real people. That's what Shitstain couldn't understand about his booking and what was wrong with it. It's what a lot of these idiots can't understand. You're not actors playing a part. You are that person. It's neither fish nor fowl. And now that this whole thing has exploded so big, they're finding out what a lot of the fucking drawbacks are. But for this to work perfectly, you are not an actor playing a part. You are that person, and whoever that person is, you never in public admit you are any different. That's how you get over, and that's how the shit draws. The WWE has fucking not only blown a hole in that by telling everybody it's all bullshit, but then they're trying to have their cake and eat it too by actually having all these people beholden and under contract to them and have to do what they say and nobody else while they're trying to copyright people instead of characters. Nobody else is going to play any of these people. They tried that before. The fake Razor and fake Diesel. It doesn't work. You can't get a fucking Dick Sargent just because Dick York has a bad back and suddenly you got Darren. Don't work that way in wrestling. They're all separate individuals.
To conclude this statement, notwithstanding the contractual language, it is imperative for the success of our company to protect our greatest assets and establish partnerships with third parties on a company-wide basis rather than at the individual level, which as a result will provide more value for all involved. I like that part. We're doing it for you. We're doing it for you.
Then I'd say, well, let me see some more of that value and then we'll talk.
What was the story? Who was it? Maybe it was even CM Punk now that I think about it. Where someone said like a filmmaker called WWE to request a certain wrestler appear in a film. And WWE was like, well, how about this guy instead? Or how about this guy? Like they were pushing the wrestlers they wanted. There's an example of a third-party opportunity that actually went through the office and the office was trying to divert it to someone else.
Well, that's happened a bunch.
I like CM Punk's take. No. What are they going to do? Fire everyone? Let them do that. Let's see the publicity for them firing everyone for being actual independent contractors.
Hey, you know what? Here's the whole problem, and we'll end this discussion. You know why that's not going to happen? Because all of the fucking trite, simpering fucking statements that they have the guys and girls make about living their dream to just be there is actually fucking true. And everybody would rather live their dream and just be there than be paid professionally or treated well. So, and that's what Vince has been working on for years now, because in the 80s and 90s, he had a bunch of fucking stars that had just sooner say fuck you and leave than do something stupid that they didn't want to do. In some cases, do something good they didn't want to do for some stupid reason. Now he's got a bunch of guys that just fucking show up and wait to be handed a script and verbiage and told what their match is going to be, and they're just happy to be there. There are no more stars. There are just cast members.